Welcome. Today is Tuesday, November 14th, 2023. This is the Finance Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag
of
the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law GLC 30A, Section 20. On November 29th, 2023, Governor Healy signed a supplemental 2023 budget bill allowing remote and hybrid meeting options for public bodies through March 31st, 2025. This meeting is being recorded. Welcome, everyone. Let me get my screen back. Good evening, everyone.
Hello. Hi, Karen.
Hello.
Good evening.
Let's see, I think we still don't have, we have 6 members in total here, so we do not have Gary, Zach, or Christopher, it looks like, but there are Al, Lawrence, Michelle, Cindy, and who else?
You.
Cindy.
Right.
And me. Is that everyone?
And you Morton, right.
And you Morton, thank you.
Right.
All right, so we are good to go. Okay. So the first item tonight on the agenda is to talk about the budget timeline. The town administrator presented a timeline to the select board, which is very consistent with what we've done every year. The town administrator is expected to have his first pass at the budget mid-December. So that would be the first time we would collectively see a first pass of where the budget is. And then the other deliverable per the town bylaws is by February 20th of each year, the select board needs to present its proposed budget to the finance committee by that date. So everything we do, we try to work within those dates so that by the time February 20th comes, we all have had reviewed all the budgets and we all know where all the issues are, subject to, of course, things are still estimates at that time because it's still early enough in the process with many of the items, including state aid, but we do the best we can to comply with that. Has everyone had a chance to, I had sent out a preliminary schedule for us as the finance committee. What we've done in the last few years, what seems to have worked very well is that we have a concentrated period of time where we schedule all our budget meetings and really get through it in 5 or 6 meetings, and we're through everything. So I had proposed several dates starting December 12th, and then moving into weekly meetings, January 2nd, January 9th, January 16th, and then the 23rd, and then having a week off. And then the last round of budgets would be February 6th. So this puts us in line to have everything reviewed before the select board finalizes its budget to us. Does that schedule work for everyone?
The only one that doesn't work for me is December 12th, but of course, I'm only one member of the group. So December 12th, Cindy and I are going to be in London. So if we were somewhere else, I could dial in. But 5 hours, starting a meeting at midnight or 11:30. But other than that, everything works for me.
Okay.
I won't be able to make the 12th, not because I'm in London, because it's the annual meeting of the South Coast Hospitals, and I'm on the board. No, and it starts at 5 o'clock, so there's no way to include the 2.
Right. Okay. So we can do one or two things. Certainly, I know the schedule gets really tight, and we all have difficult schedules as well. So if someone's got a lot of feedback going on, I'm not sure who that is. Hugh, I think it's you. Hugh, I'm just gonna mute you.
Say again?
I'm gonna mute you, Hugh, because you got a lot of feedback going on in the background. Okay, there we go. Well, go ahead. Was someone going to say something?
No, I was saying, yeah, that seems to solve the problem.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
great. Once we get into the budget season, I know there's going to be, one or two of us that cannot make every meeting, and that's, understandable since we're have a lot of meetings. So what we always ask is to just at your leisure follow up and watch the meeting from YouTube. So this way you're up to date, because when it comes time for us to vote on the budget as a whole, we want to make sure all of you have we all have the same information, so that we've all listened to the same thing and heard the same thing. So if you can't make a meeting, that's as long as you're catching up and at least watching. And if you have follow-up questions that you would have asked at the meeting, we can certainly get answers to you. But so if everyone's okay with the schedule, we can proceed. What I had done before is I had sent out a Google poll to all the department heads and asked them to select a date that worked best for them. And that seemed to work pretty well. We had to rejig a little bit because sometimes there were too many people on one date, but we managed to have a nice balance within it. So we want to have 3 or 4 budgets at the same time, not all the heavy ones all at once, if we can. And we reserve the last date, which is February 6th. We reserve that for the school. So that's the latest date possible. And I've already touched base with them on that date. So we know that date's for them.
Karen, I just have a question.
Sure.
Is that just when you say you invite them, is that inviting the departments to our finance committee meeting and going over the budgets with them? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that would be the department head coming in to present their budget, to talk about their budget.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So if we're okay with this schedule, we'll, I'll proceed ahead and send out a Google poll to everyone so we can get everything scheduled. Great. Item 2 on our agenda tonight was the liaison assignments to make any updates or changes that we needed to. I think where we had last left it was at the time we had finalized our assignments. We had left several of them that were buzzies as to be assigned, with the hopes that it might be the easiest thing, that the newest member, which is now Al, could come in and just take over those. If that's okay, that is the easiest thing to do.
That's fine with me, Karen. Whatever.
Okay. Is everyone okay with that? We'll just go
Yep.
that route.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Fine with that.
Okay. I think that was the easiest. Okay, terrific. So the next item on the agenda, I wanted to just talk about what our role is as liaison. So I know we have 3 new members on the committee this year, and 2, Lawrence, you're representing your last year's committee since Zach's not here, but I know you both had great questions. Well, what does it mean to be a liaison? What do I do? What does that mean? Right. So maybe some other members too can talk through their perspective of what it means. But in my view, you're the contact person for that department. So you help them if they have questions, or if they have questions on the budget presentation, or making sure they're scheduled to come in and have the appropriate memos and all in good order, so that when we meet with them, that, we are able to go through the schedule with ease. And just be there if they need assistance with anything. You're their primary contact.
Okay.
Does anyone else want to add to that? Hugh, you've been the next longest here, right? Longer than all of us.
You have him muted, Karen. I don't think he can unmute himself
Oh.
if you did it.
I cannot unmute him.
Oh, okay.
He should be able to unmute
Okay.
himself. Yeah, I'm not able to unmute anyone.
Well, I think in my view anyway, the role of the liaison, not all the department heads will be, open about lots of things. They may have questions, many of them don't. But it's just nice to follow along with their budget, because even though when they come in, they'll go over their budget, but sometimes when we're deliberating later about that particular budget, if some question comes up, quite often it's the liaison of that department that might be able to fill in the blank with some question that they had regarding that. So it doesn't require a lot of in-depth. It's as in-depth really as the department head, because they've already gone through this with the town administrator, and sometimes we find it a little bit overbearing to have to go through it again and then come to us and go through it again. So, their time is already kind of crunched. So, just touch base if there are any questions. Perhaps they're new to the finance committee, coming before the finance committee, and it's an intimidation factor for them as well. And just to let them know that you're there to help them through the process and understand their budget. Some budgets are pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot of things that you have to understand about it, but other budgets, are certainly more complex with mandates or lack of staff or what have you. So I think just to be there, let them know that you are there to help them, and for you to understand their budget, a little bit more than a lay person would, is very helpful. I mean, you don't have to know it inside out, but I think that's very helpful to both parties.
Mhm. Thanks, Cindy.
Just,
The example I would give,
ahead.
this budget is to have Chief explain the cruiser situation, because that could be easily misunderstood. And but we all know about it, but the world in general does not. So that's something where you point out something that they understand, but the world outside might not, that might be raised as, I won't say publicity, but to give information to the rest of the world.
Just very quick question. Who gets in contact with whom? So I've got a list, for example, of, 5 or 6 committees or individuals. Do I contact them? Do they contact us? What's the logistics? That's my question.
Yeah, so it's up to you to contact them directly, because they won't know who the liaison is. So you can certainly introduce yourself and say that you're the point of contact for them.
Okay, great. I'll do that.
Lawrence, anything else that we can add? Because you went through this last year, so you're the newest, freshest perspective.
Well, I have to say last year, I have to admit, I don't feel like I really did a lot, as I kind of came in late, and then with my work schedule, I had a lot of conflicts with being able to meeting times and such. So things are a bit calmer this year. So I'm actually looking forward to getting a little bit more stuck into the process and a bit more actively engaged with those folks. The one exception being the school. I do have good, fairly regular interaction with Nancy Stanton Cross, Tom Aubin, and others on that front. But yeah, I think any other advice, tips, guidance that the long timers like Hugh can provide would certainly be welcomed.
Great. How about you, Michelle? Does that all feel like that makes sense to you?
Yep, I was going to ask, Al kind of asked the question, and I was going to say, do you suggest we reach out to them? So is there a contact list? I know that there's the list of the committees. Obviously it would be the department head, but is there a contact list, or maybe just on the town website, we would just find who the department head is for that committee that we're assigned to and reach out to them?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the website would.
Yeah.
Jess, our clerk, our secretary might be able to help, but
Okay.
yeah, the website might be the easiest
Yeah,
way to.
okay, that's fine. We'll
Yeah.
figure it out, and I'll ask the question if I can't find my
Right,
answer.
we don't have quite a list necessarily.
Okay, that's fine.
The only thing I add is I could sort of take the approach of an examination of a witness. And the contact is the person who represents, in a sense, the town, and what people might want to know, and they might not be familiar with in terms of whoever your contact is. So you're listening to what they say, but also with the ear of the town who doesn't know about this or that, though we do, and that should be brought out then if it's something of some importance.
Okay.
Just to Michelle's question, I will just add that the town website does not have an email point of contact for every department. Many only have a phone number.
Okay. Yeah,
So
All right, I think we can get it.
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, we can, yes, we'll try to get it for you.
That's fine.
I
I
don't
can pick up the phone too. I think that's
Yeah.
how we
Yeah.
do too.
Actually, I got lucky because one of mine is the Shellfish Advisory Committee, so
Oh.
we just meet at the social. I mean, that
That's rough. That's rough.
Well, and I think one of the things we want to, and I'll put a little note together too for the departments as we send it out. So it's not just their expense budget that we want to talk about with them, it's their revenues as well. So whatever revenues the departments are generating, we want to see that and hear from that as well. A lot of times we get into the mode where they're only presenting the department budget, the expense budget, but we want to see the full picture. And there's some departments that also, some of their expense budget is what is paid for through the general fund, but they also have other expenses that are paid for through other sources of revenue. So we want to see that too. So even though the town's budget that's being voted on at the annual meeting is what's through the general fund, we really want to see what the whole department is costing. So I know the library, the council on aging, the school, probably police and fire also have other expenses that are funded through grants. So we should really see that piece too.
Makes sense.
all right.
You know,
Yep.
I also find it helpful if you know the turnbacks from the previous year. So if your department had had a fairly high turnback on their budget and they're still requesting the same budget amount this year, just why are you still requesting as much as you were, where you returned 20% of your expenses last year, but you're still asking for the same amount? Just a simple explanation for that. Quite often there are very good reasons for it. It might be a salary line, it might be an expense line for something that they decided not to purchase or whatnot, and now they're going to purchase it this year. There's usually good explanations for it, but I think it's important from a transparency standpoint that if anyone puts two and two together, to understand why they keep asking for the same amount.
Nick has a good point. And secondarily, there's also the do you have enough money to do your job question. We
No, no.
We have extra money to give them, but we should know what they think as a whole, and then we'll see if there is a way or there's not a way to deal with it.
right.
So we're specifically then looking at the current budget year and not in anticipation over 2, 3, 5 years of needs from a department. Is that what I'm hearing, or should we look into that as well?
Well, it's a great question, Al. And that kind of leads into our next topic, trying to figure out a 5, but that's okay. It's a great question, right? So typically and historically, we're looking at the current year's budget, and then we'll look backwards at what has been spent in the past. So we've never gone beyond. So in this example, we're in the fiscal 24 budget. We've never looked at what might next year look like. While we try to ask those questions, we we don't really have a solid mechanism to do that, but we should be. So we should be understanding and anticipating future needs, because that's an important aspect, of course, to overall fiscal planning. But in this process, and what the town administrator has already set out for his budget requests, or for fiscal 24 alone.
Fine. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Anything else on that? Nope. Okay. Okay. If my screen just went partially black.
But you're
So
back. You're back.
I'm back, but my screen is a third black. So if
Oh.
so I can't see the area where there would be a chat or a raised hand. So if somebody else helps me out,
Okay.
I don't
We
know.
can
What's
see
going
you though, that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not having a good computer night. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is really to talk a little more about what you brought up, really the fiscal. I'm sorry, we're doing a budget for fiscal 25. Sorry, I was off a year. We're in fiscal 24 now, so our budget's for fiscal 25. So we had talked about at our meeting that we met with members of the school committee and select board to really request really working on a 5-year operating plan and a 5-year capital plan. I'm just really not sure at this point how far we're going to be able to take that process this year. The school has indicated that they're so understaffed from an administrative standpoint that they don't really have the capacity to be able to spend time to work on an operating budget of 5 years. So without the school number, trying to do a town 5-year budget is virtually irrelevant. So I'm not sure how far we're going to get this year with that. I had suggested to. Oh, did someone want to say something?
I'm just gonna say that I'm not talking to the chief about it, but I'm sure he would say that each year sort of builds on the last year. And that so a 5-year would not be any great different than it is now. This is the police department. And fire might be the same, so.
So Karen, after you've finished this, I'd like to have the opportunity to go over my experience at that meeting about capital planning that went to that finance committee meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, typically what I've done in my career in a 5-year plan, there's 2 elements to a 5-year plan. There's a budget side, so it's strictly numbers. But then there's also a narrative side, which is a very important piece of that. So I had suggested for the school, if we could do the narrative side, I think that would have much more value than trying to come up with 5 years worth of numbers. So to really understand from a narrative standpoint, what is the school looking to do? Where are they looking to go? What are their needs? I think you can have that sort of conversation in a few hours and kind of come up with a narrative strategic plan, which would have some value. But I had requested that and haven't received an answer back on if that was something that was possible. So I'm not sure where we're going this year with the request that we've made. We've also made the request on the 5-year capital plan. And Cindy, I know you're on the capital improvement committee, so maybe you can talk a little bit about how that's working itself into that.
Sure. So the capital improvement planning committee just started their meetings just 2 weeks ago. We meet every 2 weeks. And it's just a submission of the requests from various departments before there are any deliberations. So we've only received just a couple so far. The topic was broached about, well, this is your needs for this year. do you know what you might need longer term? And I think many of it is many of the few responses that we saw from that first meeting was, well, I have I have a few things on this list. Anything you don't fund now, I'm just going to move to the next year. So it's always well, I'll take whatever I can, and what I don't, I'm just going to add it to the next year. So it's never really a true plan. It's more of a wish list that either gets funded or doesn't get funded versus, I know that in 3 years I'm going to need X. I need 3 things now. If I don't get them now, maybe within 3 years I'll have them all. And then in 3 years from now, maybe I'm going to need different stuff. But no one really, I don't think, thinks that far ahead. I mean, I think you brings up a good point. Police and fire kind of know the lifespan of their equipment. So it's, that's easy to judge more or less. As an FYI, there's the cost of a fire truck that's going to be coming up this year. And if you haven't paid attention or haven't noticed, the price of fire trucks has doubled in the last time we bought a fire truck was 8 years ago, and it was about $400,000, $450,000. The same fire truck today is $950,000. So, and the lifespan of our current fire trucks is 25 to 30 years. So about every 8 years, we should be replacing a fire truck, which tells you we should be setting aside at least $100,000, if not more, every year in some type of fund to be able to pay for that, because you're never going to come up with $1 million in 1 year. That's just an example. But I did have the opportunity a few weekends ago, to attend the State Association of Town Finance Committee members out in Sharon, and it was one of their main sessions was on capital planning, and we are country bumpkins compared to a lot of towns that are similar in size to us and structure as to how we approach this. There are many communities that have a fiscal policy regarding capital planning, and it's a percentage of the overall budget. I mean, they may say, we are going to set aside 5% or 7%, or maybe even as small as 2%, depending on the size of the budget, towards capital planning, towards capital improvement and expenditure. And they'll debate the different items, but each department fills out a detailed sheet of all of the equipment that they currently have in their department that would be considered, a capitalized expense. So, and what the remaining lifespan is of that particular piece of equipment, what the replacement cost would be, and when they think that piece of equipment is going to have to be replaced. Gee, sounds like a real business, that you're looking towards the future to see where you're going to have to spend money in different areas. So that way, every department is seen as to what I have not brought this up to the Capital Improvement Planning Commission committee yet, because I haven't met with them since I had this meeting. So if anyone from that committee is watching and saying, well, gee, why don't you bring this up? I haven't met with you yet to bring this up. So, I mean, it's a very good plan. And I know that it's very hard because of our budget constraints to look past, 30 days, for crying out loud, as to what you need, because if something breaks, it now becomes the immediate need. But we need to get a handle on what's broken and how important those broken pieces are to each department's function. And I think it can be achieved. It takes some work, but this was a very, very common practice among the finance committees that had met, and they were all swapping stories about different forms they use. And the town of Arlington, for example, had a demonstration, did a talk on this, and submitted and showed the different forms that they use and why they use them and their fiscal policy. And they have different policies regarding expenses that need to be addressed, and they try very hard to adhere to them. Most of these communities were open town meetings. They weren't all representative town meetings, and they were open town meetings, and, you know, things may go their way and they may not go that way, but they try very hard to stay within a plan. And that's really the 4-letter word, a plan, to see what your needs are going to be going forward. And this is regarding building space, equipment, vehicles, you know, anything that's capitalizable. They want to know how much it's going to cost, what the lifespan is remaining, and, you know, how long you think, you know, how much there will be to replace it. So that was my biggest takeaway from that. It was also very interesting, just on a side note, to hear the different pleas, if you will, from the different finance committee members. Some towns have strong finance committees, some do not. Some of them are there, they feel, for just a ceremonial role to kind of bless the budget, and it's really the, you know, the town administrator that kind of drives it, or the select board. So that kind of moved around a little bit, but I was surprised at some of the so-called weaker finance committees that, you know, they're lucky if they even see all of the budgets in any given year. So I think we have a good base here, but I think we need to build on that a little bit to be able to develop a good plan of communication and a good plan of, you know, financial responsibility going forward.
Thanks, Cindy, for that update. Al, go ahead. You've got your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Karen. I just wanted to bring up that I completely agree with what Cindy has said, and the feedback she got from this committee, from her conference that she went to. One of the things, and of course, if you don't know this about me now, you will as we go along. You probably boot me off the finance committee. The phrase that I hate the most is free cash.
You're gonna have to. You're stuck with that one. It's a state term, and you're stuck with that one.
Well, but we don't need to internalize it. And there are so many capital needs that go on forever. I don't care whether it's a water heater or a fire truck that we need to plan for. And it's just, it seems like a grab bag every single year of quote unquote free cash, quote unquote, that everybody wants to dip their fingers in. So I won't get on my high horse right now, but this whole concept of capital improvement planning is to me, as a business, and we are running a business, not we meaning finance committee, but this is a business. It's a $50 million business with a lot of moving parts, and we are playing catch-up ball every single day, as opposed to structuring it as a business and anticipating the future and not always reacting to the past. So anyway, good info, Cindy. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Al. Go ahead, Michelle.
So I guess I was thinking along these same lines since our last meeting, because I was wondering, obviously we heard that there is no new source of revenue that's going to drop on us, right? We determined that. We've determined that every department is like at rock bottom. They can't cut anymore, and I'm sure that's very true. So what is anybody doing with that information? What is every department? What is everybody looking? Because to me, I think there was some discussion about, sharing responsibilities, sharing jobs, because I think we need to really it's like a slash and burn kind of thing. We really need to get down and dirty and think about this stuff and really think outside the box, if you will, about how we're going to get there, because every there's a lot of suggestions, but they're not going to get us, to the promised land, if you will, with all that. So I'm wondering, what, if any, number one, that's my first question. What, if any, discussions, or what does anybody do with that, knowing that there's no new source of revenue, expenses are going up for everybody. Everybody seems to already beat a deficit, which is why, as Al said, we're always playing catch up. Capital improvements is not capital improvements. It's just a grab bag for whatever anybody was already cut. They're just trying to get their own piece of the pie there. So are there any new suggestions? Are there any new ideas as to how to work towards, because it's not going to happen in 1 year, but work towards not having this deficit, and having always the discussion of cutting, what else can you cut, and not being able to have a 5-year plan, if you will?
That's the 50 million. That's the
Right.
$50 million question.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
right? You know,
So-
who's going to get the big cut to be
Yeah.
able to save
Yeah.
some of the others? Because you can't keep nipping at everybody, right? Because
Exactly.
you can't die
Exactly.
from 1,000 cuts.
Yep.
So
And can I just add one more thing? And only because this
Yeah.
came up like purely by accident, and I'm just wondering, and this to me, it seems like, you know, I think it's, I always wonder what DEFCON are we at? We at 1 or 5? But so for instance, I was talking to somebody from Swansea, and
oh, that's a good
They-
example.
right, Swansea
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
I think Dartmouth could be kind of
Right.
too, right? So they both have fire departments that one is on call, one is volunteer. And I'm wondering, has Westport ever looked into that? I imagine that would save money. We don't certainly have their kind of, infrastructure with the strip malls and all that kind of stuff that they have in both towns. But I would imagine something along those lines, like thinking like that, those are really big changes that could impact a town. And I'm wondering if that's ever come up in the past, and if that's something that you could even entertain.
Michelle, I'm sorry, that's simply impossible. You have the part of trouble now getting any call firemen to come in. The idea of getting rid of the paid firemen and going to a volunteer means no fire. And that will then destroy your insurance rates and other things. I'm awfully tired of hearing, I'm not attacking you, Michelle, but hearing about people who need a new source of revenue. There aren't any. It's a statutory source of income. The only potential for a significant increase would be persuading the state to give us more, which hasn't seen any signs of happening. So we got what we got. Sorry.
No, that's okay. And I'm glad and that's why I'm just having the discussion, because I don't, but I'm wondering how those towns are able to do something like that.
I just want to refer when I said Swansea was a good example, because they have a very unique fiscal policy in Swansea. They bank all of their, sorry, Al, free cash. They do not use their free cash. All of their capital expenditures come out of their operating budget. They recently built a new library from free cash. They paid cash for it because they had been saving for it over years and had been setting aside money, and they built a new library and paid cash for it. They were on the threshold of getting a vote for a new town hall, and I'm willing to bet, I haven't checked, I'm sure they were pretty confident it was going to fail. They do not even tax.
Cindy went down, the vote was 1,100 against the 200 in favor.
Yeah,
It failed miserably.
yeah.
It failed
They-
big time.
They expected it was going to. They do not tax to their maximum levy. They
That's right.
still have room in their tax cap to tax more. It's just amazing to me how frugal. Now, their cost per student is very low. Their cost per student in their school system is only around 14,000. It's below the average. It's below the state average. So they're pretty frugal in a lot of things that they spend their money on. And I'm not saying that they're a good example, but they're an interesting example because they squirrel away a lot of money and they pay cash for things when they can. They have this volunteer or call fire department. They don't spend a lot of money on schools. It's an interesting difference, but many of the communities do not use free cash to fund capital expenditures. Quite often they save it or they put it down to retire additional debt, and they treat their capital expense as an expense item of the budget, not as a, okay, we've got some money here. What can we buy? It's an operating line in the budget, is capital expenditure. So that's, I think, an interesting thing. It makes our situation worse. But I also think that we've got to start putting some pressure on these regional schools. They just send us a bill and we have to pay it. And, if their bill goes up 14%, we eat it. And, this is above and beyond, a new building, a debt issue, like with Diamond or even with Bristol Aggie. But if their operating expenses, they determine they need, 10, 15% more, they just send the town the bill. And we don't really have much to say about it. So it might be up, $20,000, $25,000, and we have to just accept it. So, I mean, there are pennies that you can pick up off the floor. I used to say it was dimes, but I think now we're down to pennies that we can pick up off the floor to fight back a little bit and to push back, because we can't always be on the receiving end of, here's my bill, and this is how much you have to pay this year. Because we don't have enough money for it. And until we have some very critical department that faces a very significant curtailment in their operating hours, we're going to just be running everything into the ground. We're running this town like we're running it out of business.
Right.
Mhm.
We're barely holding on and
Yeah.
hoping next year we're going to be able to make it again.
Yeah. Michelle, I'll respond to your points, but I'll let Lawrence talk. So he's probably going to add more fuel to our fire. But go ahead, Lawrence, and then I'll I'll try to make a comment.
Yeah, let me throw another log on this fire. No, I mean, there's a lot of good points being raised here. And Cindy, thank you for that feedback. That was very interesting and very informative. And I think the sort of conclusion that I'm coming to here, from listening to what Cindy's reported from other towns, what Al said, Michelle Hugh, I think bottom line, we've somehow got to get more discipline and structure, if you will. This way of doing things of kind of always wringing our hands every year and so we haven't got enough money. Well, let's see what's going to come in free cash, and then we all make a grab for it. And it's like, well, I need a new fire truck. Well, I need a new backhoe. Well, I need 10 more teachers. It's just no way to run things, right? I mean, I love this idea of banking the so-called free cash, but with real structure around that as to what it would be used for and how and when, and putting the capital expenditures into the operating budget, which is frankly where they ought to be. I mean, Al, you're an experienced businessman. If you needed to buy some new refrigerators for your supermarket, did you just pull that out of that year's profits, or did you plan for that? I'm assuming you probably planned for it, right, in the operating costs.
Yes, not always, but yeah, I
I mean, there's always the the occasional contingency, but the point is you try to minimize that rather than just fly by the seat of your pants. So I mean, I don't know, I mean, I'd agree with Michelle. It's not going to happen overnight or even in 1 year, but I think we've got to start putting some stakes in the ground. We've got to start changing the way we do things, and it can't just carry on being business as usual. We are in difficult circumstances, and we either navigate our way through it or we're just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Well, Lance, I'd add to it. Always these are nice ideas, which I'm afraid are pie in the sky. The last use I recall of free cash was what, 400,000 or 500,000 to balance the school budget. You can't put it away if you have to use it to plug the holes in the budget right now. So all the ideas, I just don't think they have any real connection with reality.
Well, that's part of the point, Hugh, is and we just had a call this afternoon with the school district about the FY25 budgeting, and the town administrator reported that for FY25, we're looking at between 2 and 3 million in free cash coming back to the town. There was also something at 1.3 million in turnbacks. So there's money there. So we either need to make a firm decision that we are going to use that money to patch the holes in the operating budget and make it a part of the operating budgets, or we're going to put it aside in a very planful and structured way with gates and all the other mechanisms in place to ensure that it is used appropriately. But it has to, one way or the other, but not this, well, let's see what we get and then let's see what we can agree on that we're going to spend it on and let's go shopping. No, we can't do that. I can't believe that we don't have already on a department level an outline of capital equipment that is coming up due for replacement or repair with a timeline and a cost and all the rest of it. I mean, that's just fundamental to effective business management.
But I think the piece that we're going past is first you got to fill the hole in the budget with laying off half the teachers or whatever. And if you put all your money in free cash toward the future, that's fine. But how do you fill the holes? But I said nothing.
Well, yeah, I think all good things said, right? So I think, how do you solve this? Well, doing a 5-year operating plan and doing a 5-year capital plan gives us all the information in front of us, so then we can start to make informed decisions and responsible decisions. When we don't have this information, we're filling a hole in a budget, but we're creating a hole in operating in capital needs. But we don't know that hole's there until a disaster happens. It is no way to run a town. It is no way to run things. And I'm extremely disappointed in the select board, in the school committee, for not taking the initiative in the importance of doing a 5-year plan and taking this seriously.
Maybe
Or even
the school
as
committee
Lauren
to
said,
fund
basic,
it.
right, as just a basic inventory. Like, even if we just start with the inventory of what we have and what is going to be, what will need to be replaced over in the upcoming years. I mean, that's the start. I mean, that's where you have to at least start. What do you have now and what's going to wear out? It's not fair. It's not fair to the department heads. It's not fair to the employees. It's not fair to the taxpayers that we constantly have to do this. It's just a shell game every year, and it's not fair to anyone involved.
Well, it's really an ostrich budget, isn't it?
Right.
Stick it in the sand and not acknowledge what's out in the greater world.
That's a good name for it, an ostrich budget. It's by having no information, so you're making decisions and you don't even know if they're the best decision to be made because you don't have all the information to know, right? Even if you're just focusing on capital, well, if you're not thinking about that fire truck in 6 years or that roof that may need to be replaced in X years, you may be buying a piece of equipment that, sure, it's needed, but it may not be as needed as much as that roof will be in 2 years. So maybe you don't buy the equipment as much as it's needed because something else greater is going to be coming up very, very shortly. So you have to, in order to make those decisions, you need to know everything.
Need the data.
Yeah, we need data, and the data is a 5-year plan, and we're just not moving. And
Yeah, I would vehemently agree with you there, Karen. If we can't get, I mean, maybe, people might be frightened off by the term 5-year plan, but at the very least, a capital equipment plan, let's not even call it improvement. Let's call it a capital equipment infrastructure plan. I mean, that's fundamental also knowing, okay, you know, like you say, making these trade-offs between a roof or a fire truck, or, you know, 3 teachers or a bus. But yeah, you know, and this goes back to what we've talked about previously about understanding what are the services and the service levels that we absolutely have to provide. So that's like our baseline. I think, you know, between that and the capital equipment, you know, that should be where we start from. And that enables us then to make the decisions about where the priorities need to be addressed.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not listening to every select board meeting, but I look at their agenda and they don't even have the budget on their regular agendas to even
I
be
thought
discussing.
that same thing. I thought that same thing. I was looking at the agenda. I was like, oh, they're not talking about it. Yeah. Okay. They're not talking about it. I thought the same thing. I thought,
You know,
yeah.
it should be front
Awesome.
of their conversation.
Yeah.
This is the most important thing that this select board deals with, and it's not even forefront of discussion.
You know,
Even after we had our meeting in October, and then it was, you know, members discussed it with the full select board, it wasn't even, there was no level of urgency that I thought we all came out of that meeting with, that we needed to take some action, and we needed to take some action now. And it was really just updated and backburnered.
so I'm going to stick my neck out. Why not? Why not? In the last 2.5 months, there have been a minimum of 2 incidences where the Board of Selectmen have spent anywhere between an hour and a half at each meeting, hour to an hour and a half at each meeting. The most recent was last week, with planning board issues that they admitted they had absolutely nothing, no jurisdiction over, and nothing to do with, but yet they listened to road work on a development off of Tickle Road, and then this educational facility on Old Harbor Road. But to everybody's point, there isn't 1 minute of discussion about the things that really move this town forward. And so if any of the select board are listening to this now or listening to the video, I'm personally saying, get with the program. Get with the program and start dealing with the things that you can deal with, and not waste your time with things that are feel good, but do not really, address the issues of the town.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. You're going.
Karen, I have another question. I have a procedural, and I think I asked this at the last meeting, right? When we talked about requesting some of this 5-year information from each department head, I think my question was who would do that, and I think you had said, or maybe Jim had said, it would be the town administrator that should request that, right? So, but it is the job of the finance committee, and correct me if I'm wrong, as I'm new, to make recommendations, right? To listen to all of this and to, advise the town and departments as to what would be in the best interest of the town, right? Is that correct in saying that?
Correct.
So, okay. So having said that, would it be appropriate for the finance committee to want to get on the agenda of the next Board of Selectmen meeting and say, listen, we've heard all of, we had the meeting, there's a sense of urgency here. And the only way to move, maybe this is the way we used to do business, this 5-year capital improvement plans. We don't want to call it that anymore. We need this inventory so that we can make a plan, so that we can change how we do business in town, so we can try to become more efficient and all of the stuff that we just talked about, and advise that this is what we need to do. And everybody does need to get in line. And start with something. You can't give us everything, because I understand, okay, you're in negotiations right now with your union, so you don't have that number. I get that. But there has to be a starting point to move along and to try to get ahead of it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I can at least send an email to chair of the select board and ask him for an update of what they're doing with a 5-year plan since our last meeting and how that's progressing or what the status is. And go from there and see what that response is to see where we're going. Because I'm not actually even sure, Michelle, we had talked about at the October meeting that the select board was going to authorize the town administrator to then ask the departments for their statutory minimum requirements to get that list together. I'm not certain if that's even progressing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Doubt it. I doubt it.
Yeah.
Call me a pessimist, but I doubt it.
Right.
You know, another thing to Michelle's point too, I just found out today, we still have some $2 million in ARPA funds that need to be allocated by December of this year that are still up for grabs, more or less.
I wouldn't say.
Where
that
are
it's-
they?
I think that a lot of that has been earmarked for Route 6.
Yeah, that's exactly the story we heard this afternoon too.
Right.
It's being earmarked, but being on that committee, I don't see any way that money will be utilized on that project by the deadline, and that's avoiding the question altogether of whether even if that's even the best, most appropriate use for that money. But you know, this is a prime example of what Michelle's talking about. You know, there are very real, significant financial matters that need to be addressed, questions that need to be answered, decisions that need to be challenged and or made.
Yeah.
And what's happening.
Yeah.
Not much.
I mean, just as a side note, and this was said in a public meeting, so I certainly don't feel like I'm speaking out of school because, and Sue Brayton's on the line, and she was at this meeting. Someone went up to the Briggs Road Fire Station recently, had gone over to a taxpayer, someone from town, and wasn't sure whether or not that fire station had been abandoned because it was in such disrepair. The sign was kind of falling apart. The windowsills, needed to be painted. I mean, he said, I wasn't sure if you were even open. I thought maybe this place had been shut down. And that amazed me. That absolutely amazed me, that we don't even take a sense of pride of ownership, which bothers the heck out of me every time I walk in town hall. That I see those side entrance stairs, I see the building conditions, and this is, I'm not trying to blame anybody for this. I'm just saying that this is how low we have become.
Yeah.
That we can't even take care of our buildings anymore. But yet, we meet about, moving into yet another building and this, that, and the other, and, we'll see where that ends up. But gosh, can we just take care of what we own? I mean, instead of, pumping out septic systems when they overflow because they weren't, there's some problem there too. I mean, it's just one thing after another, and we've got to stop operating this way.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more. It's an embarrassment, actually.
So how do we change it?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question for another day, Lauren, but it's
Yeah.
it's a complete mindset. I have never in my life, and Hugh will probably disagree with me on this particular point. When I am looking at investing in a particular stock of a particular company, I look at the education of the CEO and the chair of the board. And if they are accountants, I will never invest in that company. Never, ever, because all they do is try to shut down and low expenses to the point where they bankrupt the company. There are exceptions, got it, but this is kind of where Westport is. We have gotten to point now where rather, and I get it completely that our revenue stream is constricted. The only open gate that we tried to do, and that was pushed back, was the override. But other than that, we are constricted financially. So I get all of that, but we are just cheaping ourselves into a situation that is not only untenable long term, but it's an embarrassment.
It's something which is not embarrassment, but tends to distort things. There was a good piece in the Herald News, I think it was, about the new playground that's coming and so forth. It looks as if we've got money running out of our ears. Money comes CPC, which can only be used for specified things, and a significant grant from an anonymous foundation fills in the rest of it. So it looks like we got lots of money for things like playgrounds. We don't.
No.
In terms of the operations, et cetera, but that's well publicized now.
Yeah, I noticed that too, Hugh, and I was kind of, well, let me say disappointed, but I felt a bit stronger than that. I had to read quite in depth into the article before it got to the very important point about how it was being funded, and that it was thanks to grants and outside funding and so on. I just felt it was unfortunate.
As you know, CPC has 3 categories, one of which is recreation.
Yeah, I just thought it was unfortunate in the reporting that it was kind of buried in there, because as you say, yeah, optically it looks like, and it's a great thing to make a big noise about this, this nice new playground for the kiddies. But yeah, the way it was reported makes it look like, oh, well, look, Westport's got loads of money. We can do this new fancy playground. So yeah, that's the nature of reporting, I guess.
Nothing you do about it. I just mentioned it because it's just what we're talking about. It gives a different look from reality.
Yeah. Well, that's the news media for you.
That's a conversation for another day too.
Yeah, it was coming up my house for a pint of Old Speckled Hen later.
Old Speckled.
One of the things mentioned in that last meeting was
All it leaves.
talking to our officials.
Michelle, you're breaking up. We can't hear you,
Oh,
Michelle.
Oops,
No.
maybe turn off your video. That might help a little bit.
Yeah.
Better?
Nope.
Better. No,
Better?
better. Say
I
something.
was just wondering if we had our local elected officials that live in town for their assistance or guidance regarding state funding and anything else they can help with.
Well, Karen and I will tell you a little story about that offline.
Okay.
As well. So yeah, we can have a confab offline.
Fair enough.
So I will be happy. So getting back, so I'll send an email to the select board chair and just ask for a status update of our requests, which were the 5-year operating plan, 5-year capital plan, and looking at minimum levels. So we had some options when it came time. So I'll see if I can get a status update, and then I'll forward that to you when I get that. As you know, we can't discuss it through email. So if we wanted to schedule another meeting before our next meeting, which is, I think, December 12th, we certainly can. And this is part of the problem, not problem, but this is part of it, right? So we have a monthly meeting. So a whole month goes by and absolutely nothing happens. It's another month of non-progress.
Karen, may I suggest that since there were 2 members that, and maybe it will create another conflict, but let's see, could we reschedule our next meeting for December 5?
Yeah.
12/5 instead of 12/12, and perhaps the 2 members that indicated it was a conflict might be present. Then if if you're going to have some information to share regarding that.
I can see, we'll have to check with our 3 members that were
Yeah.
not present to see
Okay.
how that affects them too, but we can certainly send out an email and we can respond to scheduling. We can all reply to emails by just talking about scheduling. That's no problem.
December 5 works well for me. The only thing I have that day is my statin pill at 5 o'clock. So
Hugh, does that date work for you if that's changes? I think we lost Hugh.
He's on mute.
Okay, and his video's off too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I can send an email around. to
Okay.
them to find out.
Yeah, it's fine for me too, so.
Okay, great,
Me too.
great, okay. Okay, so our next item was to really talk about committee and liaison updates. And Lawrence, I know there was a meeting today. Tom Auburn had requested a half-hour meeting today to do some sort of budget update, and I don't know what the agenda was, but I believe you attended, so maybe you can give us a quick update on what you guys discussed today?
Sure, yeah. I did attend. Christopher was there for most of it as well too. So it was, I suppose, I didn't see an agenda per se, but it was kind of an update to the kicking off of the FY25 school budget, and it was a pretty big discussion between Nancy Stanton-Cross and Jim Hartnett. So let me just go through some of the bullets. So the teacher salary negotiations have started, and it sounds like, as per usual, the incoming request is far more than can be accommodated. So there will be negotiations around that. We do have a request for FinCom representation and also Jim Hartnett to be present at a meeting on December the 13th at 4 p.m. To give a presentation on the actual financial situation of the town. There's some feeling that that perhaps the school staff are not as familiar with the situation as they could be. So they wanted to have us there to give a little bit of a presentation to kind of outline, this is the financial situation of the town. So just, be aware of that.
So can we, is it an in-person meeting, Lawrence, or virtual, or?
It wasn't clarified which way it was going to be.
I did get a request just a little while ago. Let me see. It does look like it's at 400 Old County Road. So, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't explicitly called out, but I had the impression that it was an in-person. So,
did Jim feel like he was able to handle that?
he didn't commit one way or the other during the conversation. But the request was that it be him as well as someone from FinCom. So, we looked again at how the $500K free cash for FY24 was a one-time offer. The FY25 budget for the school is for the school district is looking like it will be in the neighborhood of 200 to 250K above FY24. When you take away the 500K contribution, then that makes a difference. So there's concern that in order to balance it all out, that there may be a need to actually make some cuts in the classroom teacher population. Another option is also, or in addition to that, providing transportation for the high school students may have to be on the chopping block. So then there was questions about the ARPA funding and what's yet to be spent on that, and whether some of that could be utilized for alternative transportation options beyond. So, for example, purchasing of minivans or small buses to as a capital investment, so that we're freed from some of the negotiators, from some of the contracted obligations with Amaral Bus Company. That's when Jim also mentioned that the expected free cash for FY25 is looking to be between 2 and 3 million. There was also something brought up about the some of the initial ongoing discussions that have been opened with UMass Dartmouth about potential renting of the old high school building to be reused in some way by UMass Dartmouth. But then that raises the question of what would happen to the district administration, the early childhood learning, and the after school programs that are also held there in the old high school. So it was a robust conversation at times around some of these points. But these are all sort of like the broad brushstroke of the things that are being looked at.
Well, so
Thanks for attending.
I also say that everything should be made to fit into the high school. If we have a chance to rent something, take the maintenance off and get actual real money for it, it's a big building. Things should fit. I know you're just reporting on it, but that at least has some promise.
Yeah, and the questions that need to be addressed around that, Hugh, were things such as if there are college students taking part in programs in one part of that building, and then you have pre-K or younger children in that facility, how do those two communities need to be kept separate, and all the regulations around that. And then also if UMass Dartmouth would be willing to rent a building where they only have the use of part of it, whether or not the rent from the old high school could then be used to pay for the building of a dedicated administration building elsewhere, perhaps on the Macomber site, for example, with facilities there that could also incorporate the needs of the early childhood and the after school. So yeah, there's a lot of things, a lot of
details, but I think those are workable in terms of locked doors or partitions. And I'm not sure if that the schools get the money. I think it's town revenue that then goes through the usual system. But then again, the details down the way. Thanks very much.
Yeah, the rent money for the old school, the old high school, would obviously come to the town, and then the town would disperse that. But the idea being that, if the town works out a scheme to whereby we can build a new administration building, and then that money from the rent is earmarked to pay off that loan, that kind of arrangement. So these are the kinds of things that are being thrown around.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's stuff that needs to be worked out. There are details, the devil's in the details, etc. But the fact it's being mentioned with enough seriousness, so they're talking about how it might work, is encouraging.
Yeah, and the point, another point too, of course, was that although these discussions with UMass Dartmouth are very early days, but also those discussions do need to include the key stakeholders, such as the school committee and voter and taxpayer representation as well. And obviously, if those programs, the early childhood and after school, if those programs need to leave the high school, then that's going to create a significant situation for those working parents that rely upon those programs.
Yeah, I'm agreeing there are details, but on the other hand, that the UMass Safe had trouble renting. They rented downtown New Bedford, which they left. So
Right.
I don't try to declare how it will work, but the fact there are things that are being talked about do need to be worked out, and your points are very good. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Lawrence. That sounded like it was more than a half-hour meeting, was it?
Went a little bit over, but it was a full half hour.
Whew. Well, thanks for attending and providing that information. So
Sure.
thank you. Is there anyone on the committee that would be willing to go to that meeting to do any sort of presentation to the group?
If it's Zoom, I could. If it's in person, I've got a conflict.
So it's an in-person meeting. It's on Wednesday, December 13th from 4 to 6 p.m. is the invite that I received.
Okay. Yeah, I won't be around.
I might be able to do that.
Okay. Okay, well, let's check our schedules if somebody's willing to do that. Honestly, I'm not sure what information that we can provide more than has already been provided in previous presentations.
Right.
Probably
I mean, I'm
just want
willing to
somebody
help
to be
you
in
as
touch
well.
about it.
Yeah, we get more of a
Please
guideline.
work on the flag.
Right. Right. We certainly have the 24 or 28 page report on the finances. We've done a town meeting. Lawrence, you did it just before the override. You did a presentation there. I'm not sure we have anything different to say than what has already been said, but
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be anything different. In fact, it probably should be
Mm.
the same.
mhm,
It's just this is an audience that probably has not heard that message yet. So that was the point.
mhm. Okay. Okay, well, let's check our schedules and we'll see if there's, Michelle, you had mentioned that maybe you would be able to do that too. Did you?
Yep, I did. Yeah, again,
Okay.
depending what they're looking for,
Okay.
what they're to present, absolutely, I can
Okay,
try
all
to help
right,
out.
well, thank you. Okay. Great. Okay. I think the last item we have on our agenda is the minutes. I'd like to hold off on the October 4th minutes. I had some notes that I wanted to add into there to memorialize a little bit more what our meeting was about and what our request was made and the promises or the discussions that were made. I'd like to document that a little bit more in the minutes. So I'd like to just hold on us approving them tonight so we can just add a little bit more. But we have the note and I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to make the edits to circulate them. So
Do you want a motion to pass on it, or we'll just skip it?
we'll just skip it, but we can
Okay.
do the September 12th, 2023 minutes.
I'll make a motion, to approve the minutes of September 12th.
Right, is there a second?
A second.
Great. Any discussion on that? Okay, I'll entertain a motion, roll call. You,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Al?
Al Lees abstain. I was not part of the committee for the September meeting, I don't believe.
Oh, look at that. Okay.
I'll abs-
It feels like you're an old hat at this point. Michelle,
I'm Michelle Orlando.
Lawrence,
Aye.
and Karen Rouse, aye. Okay. Okay, does anyone have any other topics for our next meeting, which potentially will be December 5th, that you'd like me to add? If there is, you can tell me now, or you can email me later, that's fine. We've already talked about the meeting schedule, so I think we're good there. I have no other correspondence to discuss.
Oh,
Yeah.
Karen?
Yes.
When are we going to send an email out to the department? Are you going to send that memo out to the department heads to ask them what dates they want?
Yes.
Okay, so
Well,
you
I'll-
will take care of that.
Yep, I'll put I did it as a Google,
Yeah.
Google request, so it should take me just a few minutes just to take last year's and
Okay.
update it, and then I'll send that out. And then if I need assistance from some of the departments that may have not responded, then I may need your assistance as liaisons to do that. But last year, everybody was very responsive and got back to us really quick. So it really wasn't much of an issue. Okay, I have no other topics of less than 48 hours. So if we're nothing else, a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn and I have to hop because I just got a call. So Cindy Brown, aye, motion to adjourn.
All right, thank you. Hugh?
Morton, aye.
Thank you. Al?
Al Lees, aye.
Michelle?
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Thank you. Lawrence?
Lawrence Holsworth, aye.
And Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you, everyone.